Tom Cochran and Ann Ryder, the prime team for news in Indiana.
This Wall Street Journal report is brought to you by Lockhart Cadillac.
From the world headquarters of the Wall Street Journal in New York, this is the Wall Street Journal Report.
Welcome to the Wall Street Journal Report. I'm Consuelo Mack. Here's a rundown of the agenda we have planned for you on this edition. The economy continues to grind down, taking stocks, bonds, and the dollar with it. We'll assess what our future will be like under the cheap dollar and what it means to our standard of living. Plus, we'll put student loans to the test. Should taxpayers continue to bail out the billions in student loan defaults? And the loophole you can fire a rocket through. How the little kingdom of Tonga locked up the world's satellite business. But first, let's take a look at the economy. Consumer confidence might as well have been hit by a ton of bricks. It's crumbling fast. The direct hits to our psyches this week included crude oil prices, which soared on Mideast tensions, a huge jump in July's trade deficit, a substantial increase in consumer prices in August, and a drop in housing starts for the 7th month in a row. That's the longest decline since the last recession 8 years ago. But despite the numbers, Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan does not think we're in a recession yet.
Growth is, at best, sluggish. Nonetheless, judging from both hard data and more anecdotal reports, we are not, at least as yet, witnessing a cumulative unwinding of economic activity.
Coming up, the controversy over student loans and what your life will be like under a cheaper dollar.
The Wall Street Journal Report is brought to you in part by United Technologies.
Now, during Lockhart Cadillac's closeout sale, Lockhart must sell all remaining 1990 models at the lowest prices of the year. Don't wait. Selection is limited. Plus, cash back from Cadillac ends September 26th. Save thousands. Lockhart Cadillac's 1990 closeout sale is nearly over. Visit Lockhart today for the best price, the best service, and the very best in Lockhart Cadillac style. Hurry. Cash back from Cadillac is here today, but it's gone September 26th. Lockhart Cadillac, 5550 North Keystone.
Sunday on 13 WTHR. The Colts look for their first victory of 1990. Don't miss any of the action as the Colts travel to the Astrodome to face the Houston run and shoot offense. Tune in at 11 for Inside the Colts Huddle. Don Hine and the News Center 13 sports team provide you with the most complete preview of the game. It's Inside the Colts Huddle at 11 and the Colts versus the Oilers at noon. Right here on 13 WTHR, your Colts station.
We're in the planes you fly in, the buildings you live and work in, the cars you drive. We've even been to the moon. In all we do, in buildings, aerospace, and automobiles, we're working together, sharing what we know, reaching toward a single goal. United Technologies.
Welcome back. Recently, the largest guarantor of student loans in the country announced that it was about to go bankrupt because of the high rate of default on its student loans. The government is in the middle of working out a rescue plan. Meanwhile, the government's role in bankrolling higher education is coming into question. World World War II was the first time the U.S. paid money directly to individuals to finance their higher education. And the 1944 GI Bill did it in a big way. It gave veterans a monthly stipend to cover the entire tab for their education and living expenses. At the height of the Cold War, the shock of seeing the Soviets launch the first satellite into space launched Congress into passing the National Defense Education Act of 1958. It provided the first education loans for mathematics, science, and foreign language studies. The government's role in higher education expanded dramatically during President Johnson's Great Society era. In 1964 and 65, federal aid became available to low and middle-income families. Back then, higher education meant college. Outright grants were available for qualified low-income students, and the smaller student loan program was primarily for those better off.
The program was basically a program of supplemental assistance to help young people pay for a college education. It was primarily oriented towards the middle income at that point.
That was soon changed by Congress. In 1972, students attending trade schools qualified for student aid. In 1978, any qualified student could get a loan regardless of financial need.
Governor, are you prepared to take the constitutional oath?
I am.
But the climate shifted. Inflation sent the cost of higher education through the roof, and a new administration came in determined to cut government fat. The Education Department itself was targeted for phase-out. In 1981, aid was restricted to families making under $30,000. And in 1986, accessibility was limited even further. But limiting access to funds didn't mean less demand or fewer funds. Just the opposite. The loan program exploded in the 80s. The number of students receiving loans increased 43%. The amount of loans given to students expanded more than 50%. And the form of student aid changed, from more reliance on grants to more reliance on loans. David Evans, staff director of the Senate Education Subcommittee, would like to bring back the grants, named for his boss, Senator Pell.
The tragedy is that basically since 1980, we've gone from a post-secondary education federal student package that was almost 75% grants in 1980, and today in 1990 is precisely the opposite. It's almost 75% loans.
Why is that a tragedy?
It's a tragedy because basically what you're doing is you're requiring low-income people to borrow in order to finance a college education. We are saddling them with a very large debt.
That debt is showing up in student loan defaults. The dollar volume of defaults has soared, rising 8-fold in the last decade to over $2 billion this year. And that is where the controversy begins. Trade school students, who now get 25% of all educational loans, have a default rate that is 4 times higher than students attending four-year colleges.
I'm trained to be an automotive mechanic.
I am being trained to be a refrigeration mechanic.
If I wouldn't have the student loan, I wouldn't be able to attend school.
If you serve high risk, you will have an appropriately higher default rate. Because we serve more low income, more disadvantaged, we will have a higher default rate.
At the most high-risk end, and these are, students that come from very disadvantaged backgrounds, they don't have those relatives and friends to rely on when a payment's coming up and they can't quite make it.
Undersecretary of Education Ted Sanders says the defaults are concentrated in relatively few trade schools.
The real issue is getting the bad actors out of the business. Most schools are being now tainted by the problem that we've got because of the actions of a few.
One of the ways to do that, as part of the budget negotiations, the administration has proposed saving money by giving the Education Department expedited authority to stop providing loans for any schools that consistently have default rates of more than 25%. Of the 2 trade schools that Dorothy Cann runs, one, a well-known chef school, has a default rate of 12%. The other, a default rate of 34%.
At Apex, we've had homeless people. We've had people recently released from prison. So I'm not saying that Apex is totally populated with at-risk students, but we have a high majority of them. This is a very rough climate. There are a lot of people that want trade schools to close, and we're not going to close. We don't think that someone, just because they're at risk, should be thrown on the trash heap of life, and no one should touch them because maybe they won't pay back a student loan.
Joining us by satellite from Indianapolis are Robert Bottoms, president of DePauw University, a leading liberal arts university, and Rennie Champagne, president of ITT Educational Services, a division of ITT, which operates 38 technical institutes in 19 states. Mr. Bottoms, government budgets are tight. What is wrong with the government concentrating on educating the most disadvantaged among us?
I think there's not anything wrong with the government concentrating on educating the disadvantaged. What concerns us in the private sector is that we think we do a very good job of addressing that population, and what we've seen happen over the last 10 years is an increasingly large share of the money reserved by the government for education going into the for-profit or the trade school sector. This hurts our students, we feel, and is a natural concern for us.
So what do you think should be done about that?
One of the proposals many private college presidents have is simply to separate government funding of education into the for-profit sector and the not-for-profit sector.
What would that do?
That would give the public and the Congress a better handle on tracking the dollars they appropriate. Right now, the proprietary sector and the college sector is all lumped together in one large sum, and it's very difficult to track where that money goes. For instance, we were unaware until just the past few months that in the last 10 years there had been a shift in the funding formulas and the funding process so that now the proprietary sector in loans, for example, will grant more loan money to 2 million people in the proprietary sector than the 12 million people in the traditional higher education sector. That's a concern for us.
Mr. Champagne, what do you think about that proposal of splitting up the funding so that the trade schools are basically funded separately from the colleges and universities?
The country faces a very critical issue, not necessarily dealing with whether or not there ought to be two financial aid funds established for people who are interested in attending post-secondary education. More specifically, what the country is facing is a real dilemma of how are we going to educate all of our citizens to the levels that we are going to require as a country if we're going to maintain a very competitive environment within a progressively more global economy. And by restricting a student loan program set up separately for proprietary schools is not the answer. In fact, it's very discriminatory, and it sounds somewhat elitist to even suggest that some students are not as capable or as worthy as others to get federal aid funds.
Whoa,
who said that? Not the proper way to go.
Wait a minute, who said, number one, that trade students or schools should not get federal funds? Are you saying that if you split up the two, that you're going to restrict the funds that are going to go to trade school students?
Look, the issue here is that separate but equal has never worked in this country, all the way back to 1954 when the Supreme Court came down very strongly in Brown versus the Board of Education, indicating that separate but equal educational facilities are not what we are looking for as a country. This is the same issue in this instance. There is the situation where separate but equal will turn out actually to be separate and unequal. There is absolutely no reason why people in the proprietary sector should be denied access to federal funds. It is a matter of equal access and really avoiding discriminatory behavior.
Mr. Bottoms, are you saying that funds should be denied to trade school students?
I'm not saying that at all. I would never say that. In fact, the counterpoint I would make to what Mr. Champagne says is, in fact, it's the lower economic classes wanting to come to private schools like DePauw that are being hurt by some of the current practices. I simply think we have two sectors involving themselves in the higher education budget. One is for-profit and one is not-for-profit. I'm simply calling on Congress to separate that funding. I never said it should be equalized or have any formulas. I think the trade schools serve a very good purpose. I think they should be able to make their case independent of traditional higher education and that they should be funded. But I think we should be viewed separately. We have very different missions.
But given the fact that the budget pot is very small, or at least is getting smaller and more restrictive, do you think the result will be that trade school students will get fewer funds, and that would you like the balance shifted so that your students get more funds?
Well, I think any president of an institution would like to see their students get more funds. some of the things that concern us are these. We see that the proprietary sector, in fact, with a smaller number of students, last year received more loan funds than did the public and private institutions put together. We see that in the Pell Grant program. 10 years ago, the proprietary or the for-profit schools received 7% of those funds. Now they receive in excess of 25% of those funds.
All right. Mr. Champagne, I'm going to get you in here. We've got about 5 seconds left, but basically, what are you most afraid of with a proposal like this?
Well, first of all, the proposal has been outright rejected by Secretary Cavazos and various members of Congress. Our fear is that it would be discriminatory in nature and would provide unequal access to post-secondary education across the board.
All right, we would better end it at that. Mr. Bottoms, Mr. Champagne, thanks very much for joining us. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Coming up, why that trip abroad will cost you 25% more. Stay with us.
Recently, Hubler Chevrolet ran a very successful ad campaign for those of you who are buried, meaning you owe more on your current vehicle than what it's worth. Well, we still want to help you get out of being buried, and now we can help you even more. If you've had problems getting financing because you're a first-time buyer, recently divorced, or because you've had a bankruptcy, Hubler Chevrolet has a program that can help you get out of your current vehicle and into another. So stop by Hubler Chevrolet and let us help you. And then you'll know why we're good people to do business with.
Now at 5 o'clock, News Center 13 expands to bring you more news, weather, and sports. News Center 13 Primetime with Tom Cochran and Ann Ryder. Now at 5 o'clock. It's the right news at the right time.
Tomorrow's attractions are here today on the next edition of Preview. TV's battling Big Mouth takes a stab at the big screen. That's entertainment, an exclusive look at the newest video arcades for adults. Supersonic Harry Connick takes his big band bop to Broadway. Plus, celebrity news and video toasters on the next edition of Preview.
Monday at 7 on 13 WTHR.
Welcome back to the Wall Street Journal Report. I'm Consuelo Mack. The dollar had another bumpy week in the foreign exchange markets. Speculation is that the Bush administration has quietly decided to let the greenback slide. Well, how will our world change under a lower dollar? Ian Hunter is here with that story. Ian.
Well, life with the lower dollar should affect just about everyone, and in fact, some people are already feeling it. Other effects will take years to be felt.
Travelers are already taking it on the chin. A visit to this English village will cost you 20% more than a year ago, and that's without taking inflation into account, the pound rising sharply against the dollar. In Switzerland, it's even worse. Changing money can be a shock.
1, 2, 3, 4, 500.
The Swiss franc up nearly 29% against the dollar in the past year, and the story's the same throughout Western Europe. A drink in a Parisian cafe will set you back 25% more, as will a tour of French chateaux. Experts say the slide in the dollar isn't over yet and may well be continuing with the quiet blessing of the Bush administration.
I think the administration has, in fact, been in favor of this for quite a while, and it was the Federal Reserve that really didn't want to go along. Now that the dollar is moving in the administration's direction, I think they're pretty happy to let it continue for a while.
But you don't have to head abroad to shop to feel the effects of the lower dollar. They're headed for a car showroom near you.
I think the Japanese will try to hold the line in the short run, but over the next several quarters try to eke in an additional 2 to 3% price increase to address the appreciation of the yen.
For European car makers, a tough time ahead. Their currencies are up far more than the yen. The winners may well be U.S. car makers, who are being given more time to show that their products are improved. But U.S. clothing makers will get no such respite. While European imports will cost more, prices for the majority of imports will remain relatively unchanged.
A lot of clothing that's imported comes from Pacific Rim countries in Hong Kong, South Korea, Taiwan, China, where in many cases their currencies are tied to the U.S. dollar.
And that means that with the exception of Japan, Pacific Rim currencies such as the Hong Kong dollar are virtually unchanged versus the U.S. dollar. Aggressive prices for Chinese-made toys and many Asian electronics from places such as Taiwan and South Korea should also stay about the same, while Japanese and European products are more expensive. But the lower dollar isn't all gloomy news.
A weaker dollar does make our industry more competitive in global markets. That feature sometimes takes a year, 2 years or more to work its way through the system, but it does help in time make the country more competitive. It also means that foreign earnings of U.S. companies are worth more in dollar terms.
Major beneficiaries include the drug industry, computer makers like IBM and Compaq, and farmers who grow corn, wheat, and soybeans, our main agricultural exports. The picture, however, is less rosy here on Wall Street. Foreign investment in the U.S. is down. Investors can earn higher returns abroad. That is pushing the dollar down, and the falling dollar makes U.S. investments less attractive.
Foreigners are not likely to want to invest in a currency that's going down because for them it's the reverse. That means that the value of their investment simply erodes in their own currency terms.
That in turn keeps interest rates for everything from mortgages to car loans higher than they otherwise would be, though not forever.
At some point, the dollar will have fallen enough that the dollar is cheap. Dollar-denominated assets are so cheap that the foreigners will want to buy them en masse, and at that point the capital will come in, the dollar will bottom out, and everything will be wonderful.
In some ways, this current bout with a low dollar is different from, say, the mid-1980s. This time, economists expect less of a gain in exports because the world economy is slowing, and imports won't fall so much. That's because we're increasingly importing from countries whose currencies don't fluctuate against the dollar. Consuelo?
Thank you, Ian. Next, we are going to travel to the little South Pacific kingdom that is causing gridlock in space.
In the face of fearsome competition, information technology can be a very powerful weapon. Anderson Consulting can help you find the best way to unleash it.
For the image you choose to weave, pure wool, the fabric of fall fashion at L. Strauss. Polo U by Ralph Lauren, business wear with authority, separates that command respect. Shake hands with the polished look of Indiana's largest collection of Polo U. Join a special fraternity, those who demand 100% pure wool. Visit the Polo U Trunk Show Friday and Saturday at all locations and apply for our instant line of credit. Wool, the fabric of fall fashion at L. Strauss.
Now, during Lockhart Cadillac's closeout sale, Lockhart must sell all remaining 1990 models at the lowest prices of the year. Don't wait. Selection is limited. Plus, cash back from Cadillac ends September 26th. Save thousands. Lockhart Cadillac's 1990 closeout sale is nearly over. Visit Lockhart today for the best price, the best service, and the very best in Lockhart Cadillac style. Hurry. Cash back from Cadillac is here today, but it's gone September 26th. Lockhart Cadillac, 5550 North Keystone.
Great businesses turn on a little pin. At least that's what poet George Herbert thought almost 400 years ago. But as Chris Graves reports, the saying was never truer than in today's space-age story of King Tupu and the satellites.
Way out in the middle of the South Pacific, near the imaginary line where Monday turns into Tuesday, lies the tiny island kingdom of Tonga. For thousands of years, the Tongan economy has revolved around coconuts, bananas, fishing, basket weaving, batik. But now you can add to that list satellites. A little too much sun for Tonga's King Tupu? Nope. He's just expanded his empire into space. And it's all due to this man, Matt Nilsson, an American entrepreneur who says he went to Tonga to retire.
When I got to Tonga and laid on the beach and sailed enough, In discussions with His Majesty and his family, it became apparent that Tonga had an interest in bettering communications in the South Pacific. So we founded a company called Friendly Islands Satellite Communications Limited, for short TongaSat.
TongaSat has locked up all the remaining orbital parking space for satellites that can link Asia with the U.S.
China could have done it, Japan could have done it, Australia could have done it, the United States, for that matter, could have done it, and so could any nation in that wide area. But they simply did not think of it.
Just what they did was take advantage of a loophole. Satellite space is tightly regulated by international law, but the law says any nation can reserve one of those available slots. Tonga reserved all 16 of the remaining spots, and since satellite demand continues to grow rapidly, the new company, called TongaSat, hopes to make money leasing back those slots to others.
You see, once those lakefront lots are sold out around the lake, you can't buy one more to put a hotel on, can you? You have to either lease it from somebody or be a partner with him. So in this case, we will provide that lakefront lot, the orbital positions, in exchange for our 8 to 10% of equivalent equity.
And the odds are TongaSat will make a lot of money, at least in Tonga terms, all of which has led angry critics to accuse Nilsson of being a greedy frontman looking for his pot of gold in Tonga.
In fact, I'm a millionaire already, so I wasn't concerned about that when I started this project.
Tonga now has 10 years to use the satellite parking spaces or lose them. But it appears King Tupu has been bitten by the Hollywood bug.
We hope to start a television station of our own here soon. In fact, this year.
Chris Graves, The Wall Street Journal Report.
All we can say is good luck in the TV biz, King. That's all for this edition of the Wall Street Journal Report. Thanks for visiting with us. Have a great week, and of course, make it a productive one.
This program has been sponsored in part by Ford and your Ford dealers. For a transcript, please send $3 to the Wall Street Journal Report. Transcripts, 267 Broadway, New York, New York, 10007.